Good evening. I'm Jessica Hulten, the Assistant Manager of Education at the Illinois Holocaust Museum and Education Center. I'm proud to be a part of WTTW's Jewish Heritage Programming in April. It is now my great pleasure to introduce you to our amazing panelists. Trevor Avery is the Director of Lake District Holocaust Project, which is based in Windermere in the heart of the Lake District of England. He has been an advisor on a number of national television and radio programs, including the 2020 Prix Europa Award winning BBC and Warner Brothers drama, The Windermere Children, and makes an appearance in the accompanying BBC documentary, The Windermere Children, in Their Own Words. He has also appeared in the BBC Radio 4 documentaries, including Open Country, The Windermere Boys, and a special edition of BBC Radio 4 sketches in the BAFTA award-winning Who Do You Think You Are, featuring Robert Rinder in 2018. Other programs including ITV's The Story of the Swastika and the 2010 BBC One documentary, The Orphans Who Survived the Concentration Camps. He received a BEM in 2016 Queen's New Year's Honors List for services to the heritage in the Lake District. Eleanor Greene has been a drama executive at Wall to Wall since 2010, where she most recently was the EP for the multi-award-winning Windermere Children for BBC Two, The Man in Room 301, a psychological thriller for Finnish platform Elisa Viaplay, and The Scandalous Lady W, starring Natalie Dormer for BBC Two. She began her career as a runner and worked her way up as a script editor, development producer, and producer at Red Production Company, eventually producing the winning script for the Dennis Potter New Writing Competition, resulting in a commission for BBC Two and the film Indian Dream. She moved to London to join World Productions, where she developed and produced Murder Prevention for Five and Party Animals for BBC Two. At Company Pictures, she developed and produced The Silence for BBC One, which went on to win a number of awards, including 2 IFTAs. She continues to develop original drama for Wall to Wall, working with all major broadcasters. Ike Alterman was born in Southeast Poland in 1928 and was the middle of 3 children. After the Nazi invasion of Poland, Ike and his family were forced to live in a ghetto until deportations began in 1942. Ike was a prisoner in multiple Nazi concentration camps until liberated in May 1945. 3 months after liberation, Ike was one of 300 orphan children to be transferred to Windermere for rehabilitation, where the staff helped the children survivors readjust to life and they began to live again. He is one of the 5 Windermere boys featured in the film. After Ike settled in Manchester, where he opened his own jewelry business and married his wife of 30 years, Myra. He has 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, and he now lives with his partner, Diane. Welcome, everyone.
Not 2 granddaughters.
Okay.
So I wanted to start the questions with Trevor, since you are the historian and was the advisor on the project. Can you tell us about how you first got involved in researching the story of the 300 children at Windermere?
Hi, Jessica. Well, it began 16 years ago now, and it was quite a fortunate meeting with a couple of elderly folks in a small market town of Kendal. By small market town, I mean small, in the north of England. Very, very English, very pastoral, very simple. And I put on an exhibition about the impact of World War II on this rural community. And in the course of this exhibition, 2 gentlemen came in and began to talk about what they did in the Lake District during that time, farming, etc. And but one of them turned to me and said, of course, you know, this is where the children from Auschwitz came. And I sort of, excuse me, I didn't know. And they said, oh yes, we remembered them. We remember them arriving. So that was really in 2005 set me on a journey to find out about these children. Locally, I couldn't really find any information. and I came across Sir Martin Gilbert's book, The Boys, but I thought, well, this needs to be done. We need to cover, why they were here, who they were with, what they did. And I contacted Sir Ben Helfgott, who's based in London. He was one of the boys. It's a major figure in Holocaust education and commemoration work in the UK now. But Ben was one of the children who came to Windermere. And he arranged for me to have a meeting in Manchester with three of these children, three of the boys, who Ike will know well. I mean, it was Jack Eisenberg, Maya Hirsch, and Sam Laskia. And I met them at the Midland Hotel in Manchester with a couple of colleagues. And when I tell you that I thought the meeting was for 2 hours, I looked back recently on the diary, and it actually took 5 hours, but it felt as though it was 2 hours. For most of that time, 4 hours was fun and laughter and just joy. And it was completely not what I expected a meeting with Holocaust survivors to be like, 3 of them at least. And then the final hour came, I said, look, I'd really like to tell your story about your time in Windermere when you were here. And that was the key moment, because they responded with, oh, you mean Windermere? Windermere, it was wonderful. Oh, the time we had. So I said, well, can I tell your story? I'm not of the Jewish faith or Jewish community. I'm a guy from just further north than where they are, in Manchester. And I didn't know how they would receive me into that sort of world. And it's quite, I felt as though was I intruding into this world of terrible horror and all those kind of aspects to it. And they were absolutely wonderful. They said, of course we will. We'll help you all that we can, and we'll put you in touch with other of the boys. But it was the final half an hour where I said, can you tell me a little bit about how you came to be in Windermere? And that moment, the whole atmosphere turned into something far deeper. And in fact, one of them, Jack, a very dear friend of mine, he began to tell his story and he began to cry. And the change in mood was quite dramatic. And I noticed that Sam, who was sitting next to him, gently reached out his hand and placed it on Jack's wrist. Nothing was said. And I thought, there's something here, there's support, there's something quite profound going on. It's sort of a gesture of support. And I thought it felt like I was talking to 3 family members, which later on it became, that's what it felt like. That's how they described themselves. And from then on, it was just a race against time, really, to interview as many of them as we possibly could. At that time in 2005, there were probably about 150 still with us. Now, there really aren't. So we were very fortunate at that time to capture the drive was on to interview and talk to as many of them as we could, because we knew documents and papers were there. We came across documents, papers in archives, but we wouldn't get their stories. We really had to focus on that. So we spent a lot of time to get their stories and getting the stories of the local community who welcomed them. So we brought the two together. I mean, I'm foreshortening a story, but that in its essence, and then it's led me to places I'd never imagined visiting. When I say to people, really, your life can turn in a moment, mine certainly did. And I sort of followed that journey. And part of me still thinks somebody's going to tap me on the shoulder and say, you don't need to do it. It's been done before. I don't know why it wasn't done before. But I just, people ask me why. And I just said, it just had to be done. It had to be done. And that was the motivation for myself and my colleagues. And it led me to meet some really, really wonderful and inspirational people, So I hope that helps as a brief introduction.
No, it's perfect. Thank you. And that leads into Eleanor for how she discovered the project. And why did you feel it was important to create this film and tell the story?
So what happened was the BBC came to my boss and asked her to develop or pitch some ideas for Holocaust Memorial Day, which obviously happens every year, and they wanted to commemorate it on the BBC for now and many years to come. And my boss is Jewish, like me, and she said, absolutely, we really want to pitch for this slot. So really, it was an invitation from the BBC. But because Leanne and my boss, Leanne and I were both Jewish, we also felt like we had to set an agenda for what sort of story we would like to tell. And we were very clear that we wanted to tell a story that was set in the UK, that was about British survivors, that felt very British at its heart, because we wanted a British audience to really connect with the story. We didn't want it to be something that happened to people that lived abroad. We wanted it to feel like a story that happened to people who lived here. So we literally read every book written by every survivor that has ever been written that's set in the UK, and we read stories of revenge and of great sort of business success, and we read stories of great tragedy and family loss, and we were sort of ploughing through this very huge stack of books. And I mentioned it to my very best friend Susie, whose sister is married to Ben Helfgott's son. And my friend Susie said, "Oh, you must talk to Ben Helfgott, who Trevor just mentioned, because he has an amazing survival story." And so I went to talk to Ben, Helfgott, and Ben then introduced us to the 45 Aid Society and to Trevor. And through the 45 Aid Society, which is the sort of collection, well, Ike can probably tell you more about them, but they're the collection of boys and girls who were brought over to the UK from Windermere and from other sources. And from there, we were sort of introduced to a network of survivors who were, including Ike, who were happy to share their story with us. So really, that's how the story came to me, or rather how I found the story. And yeah, as the development of the project grew, sort of the desire to tell the story grew as well, because obviously the stories are incredible and the people that we met are incredible too.
Thank you. It's an amazing story, and I really want to turn to Ike to have him tell us about his experience at Windermere and his life in general and his experiences.
I was liberated in Prague and brought over to England. And we were traveling in a bomber, big bomber airplanes. They took everything out of inside, basically. We were all sat inside. And I was on one of the first transport plane to come over. When we arrived to Carlisle in England, we came off the aeroplanes, and they took us into a hangar, a big hangar where they usually kept the aeroplanes. And we walked in, and we couldn't believe what we saw. There were tables set out, a tablecloth with bread and butter and jam. And tea with milk. Well, we never drank tea with milk at home. So that was something new. And then they said, well, sit down. And we started grabbing the food. Whatever was there on the table, there was masses of food. And within 5 minutes, everything is gone, because we are so used to not being able to get enough food, and suddenly there's all this food, and everybody started grabbing like that, right, left, and center, stuff in our pockets, and it was cleared out of there. And we just couldn't believe this, all this food. Right, so after that, they got us onto some charis, which is a small bus, and transported us to Windermere. When we arrived there, it was very dark. And then they said, right, we'll take you to the quarters where you're going to stay overnight. And what we could make out of them is they call them chalets. It's like a prefabricated little housings. And they opened the door and said, you can go in here. When I got inside, I couldn't believe my eyes. We've got a bed with beautiful sheets on, linen, towels, cushions, the things that we've not seen for years upon years. And it comes with on bunks, bare bunks. And urinals, hot water. We couldn't believe what we were seeing. So we started to shower, get ready. Actually, we were very, very nervous because we were so agitated. We were so used to the bad things that we couldn't believe it. Is this reality? Is this real? And eventually we got ready and we got into the beds after cleaning up and all that. The next morning we woke up and they said, well, get dressed. Well, we didn't have any proper stuff because all the stuff that we were wearing was full of lice from the camps. And everything was torn, nothing fitted or anything like that. Shoes, whatever you could find, whether they were torn or not, it didn't matter. Because in the camps, in quite a few camps, all I had is straw tied up with some rags as shoes. And they got us to go into for breakfast. Well, again, we couldn't believe it was a big, massive hall there, massive hall. And the tables were set with food. Again, we couldn't believe our eyes. What is this? Suddenly we woke up and we're in a different world. We looked outside and the green fields and the people were so kind, all tried to help us to sit down to the food. And again, grabbing everything we saw, we grabbed everything we saw, we grabbed because we were so used to not getting enough food that today we didn't know what tomorrow was going to bring. That was the attitude that was worked into our minds. It was terrible. We went to morning prayers and that sort of thing, and we all sat down and we just couldn't believe what was happening. And the attitude in our outlook, in our thinking, all we were used to, it's seen concentration camps, the crematoriums were burning day and night, glowing in the night. And transports were coming from all over the continent into the, like Auschwitz and Birkenau, especially in Birkenau, we had 4 crematoriums there. And you couldn't just switch all these things off suddenly. It was with you all the time. And there we've got the opposite. People were helping. Non-Jewish people came along and tried to help us along to work in the kitchens or what, to the laundries or whatever like that. And they didn't know us from Adam, but there were people there. So all we saw through the war and the camps is trying to keep away from other people, because you never know. Like you were in the bunks during the night and didn't have any blankets, nothing, just bare boards we were lying on. But you were always fearful in case somebody will come in the night. If they smelled that you had a little piece of bread, they could kill you, and they did, or suffocate you. And a lot of people never made the following morning because of the terrible things we were going through, and the mentality of the person. Even some gave up, some just passed away because of the conditions that we had to go through in the camps. And here we were in paradise. We were free. We couldn't believe we were free. We could do anything we wanted. Nobody tried to force you to do anything or try to go here or go there. If you wanted, you went. If you didn't, I want to go here. I want to walk here. I want to walk there. I want to see the lake. This was all like manna took to us. It took us a long time to get used to this. For instance, I saw a rabbi there who was in charge there, Rabbi Wise. After all these years, I still remember. I think some things you'll never forget. And I saw him one day playing football, a rabbi with a little beard like that, and playing football on the Sabbath. I couldn't believe what I'm seeing, because where I come from, we're all religious people. My grandfather was a beard like that, and all he ever did is learning the scriptures. His sons were running the business, and I used to have to go there every Saturday afternoon, that he should listen to me, how well I've learned the scripture for the week. And I used to be petrified in case I make a mistake. And here we were in Windermere, grass, open fields. And we used to walk all the way to Windermere, to the Bowness. And there was a steamers. We used to go on the steamers. We never had a penny. But people somehow provided things for us. Everything was free. We went to cinemas. One guy once in opened the doors at the back, and everybody else was going in. Nobody would stop us. The people were so kind and so appreciated that these people have survived. And it was a wonderful time there. And we met up with other people, and we started to gel with one another, because we were all strangers to each other, except for one person that I found after we came off the transport, you know, and that was a guy called Sam Lasker, my great personal friend. He ended up in Manchester, around the corner from me. And unfortunately, he passed away just recently. I'm looking at the picture, the two of us there on the wall. I've lost a lot of my friends, a lot of the survivors who passed away over the years. Jack Eisenberg, as Trevor mentioned, unfortunately, he's still alive, but he's like a vegetable. So I couldn't speak about the war in those days. Some of them gradually went out and went to schools, and to societies and universities and all that, to speak about our experience, what we went through during the war. But I couldn't open up at all until one day I was asked to give a speech about my life. That was the A.J. Bell
Yom HaShoah.
Yom HaShoah in Manchester. And I came into that hall, and it was a massive hall, and there were televisions all right round. And I had to get up and told them my story. That was the first time I opened up. And people couldn't believe it. Because obviously a lot of people didn't know what was going on, what we've been through. But getting back to Windermere, it was for us a new life. A new life. For all we've lost, I lost all my immediate family. I'm the only survivor of my whole family. And it was difficult. But we started to adjust a little bit more to life because of the time that we had in Windermere. It was like a tonic for us. And I'm forever being grateful to the British government for, first of all, to allow us to come to England. This actually came about when the Jewish committee got together and they approached the British government. Would they allow some surviving children, boys and girls, from the Holocaust? And the British government said we will allow 10,000.
No, 1,000.
Sorry,
1,000.
1,000 children come in, 1,000 children. Unfortunately, they only managed to find 732 children in all. So the Germans made a good job out of it. And the committee undertook to look after us, all our needs and all that. The government didn't have to pay for anything for the upkeep. And Then after a time, after 3 months, I believe it was, Windermere decided that we have to go to break up. And
Went to Manchester.
I was with a few others, about 30 boys and girls. We were located to go to Manchester. A Jewish community there to help us. Some went to London, some went to Gateshead, some went to Glasgow, etc. And then we started to live in hostels. First hostel we were in Manchester.
Tell the story.
Sorry? When we arrived in Manchester, again, it was dark. And the next morning when we woke up, we looked out, it was dirty. Because it was an industrial town, basically, over the years. The buildings were covered in a lot of black stuff. The weather wasn't good at all. But we had people there to look after us. Again, some people were perhaps prior, they came in 1938, 39, some of them, and they came forward to help us settle. And they used to come in and mix with us because we couldn't speak English. We didn't know a word of English. So we could only speak what we picked up from home, that's Yiddish or Polish. And then again, we had a rabbi there who was in charge of the hostel. And some of the ladies who were doing the cooking and the cleaning and all the stuff. And they were also kind to us. Again, they never tried to force anything onto you because they knew if they tried to give us orders and try to force us, we'll do just the opposite. Because we were so used to taking orders by the Germans in the camps that you had enough of this taking orders. Here we were in a free country. We want to do what we want to do as well. Okay, they're giving lessons. Try to show you how to speak in English, for instance. This one, well, I don't think, I want to stay in bed or whatever. Nobody said, no, you can't do that. So they had to be careful how to handle us. In fact, we were, in some ways, we were wild. We lost everything. We lost our parents, uncles, aunties, grandfathers, grandmothers, local people we used to play with out in the streets in Poland before the war and all that. All gone. So we started to gel in the hostel with the people that were there. Among the survivors, there was Maya Bomstick, there was Sam Lasker, there was me, there was Herschel, there was Maya, there was some. And even then, you go on better with some than others. So we had little circles. Fine. It doesn't mean say we were against the others. We're not. It's just you got on with somebody that you could gel with. And then we were time went by a bit, and we wanted to be a bit more independent, because you can't expect to live on charity all the time. So we started to get a bit more independent, and we
Worked.
started to look for jobs. Now, I remember from at home when I was a little boy, I had several uncles. I was born in my mother's hometown called Ožarov, and my father came from Ostroviec, which was about 25 kilometers away, apparently. So I had some uncles in Ožarov who were jewelers. Not like in jewelry, making jewelry and that. But it was so old-fashioned. We didn't know any different, quite honestly. But when we were very young, after a time, we moved from my mother's hometown to my father's hometown, which was already a bigger city. And it's a different life. And I had several uncles there, and a great uncle who were also in the jewelry trade, making jewelry. It got to me. It's like the clowns and the sawdust in the circus. It gets into your blood. So when I started living in lodgings, I went out to find a job. And all I wanted to do was to work in the jewelry trade, repairing jewelry, manufacturing, and whatever. And I trained in Manchester. Cut a long story short, I was working for a man who, his father-in-law was a clapper. You know, one we used to go out and collect all bits of jewelry and sell them. You know. But this son-in-law was an accountant. He married into the old man's business. When I started working for him, he didn't know how to do it. So I started picking things. You see, it's always in the back of your mind. You've got no one to take care of you. No father, no mother. So I started working. I said, I want to give me a bit of work. I'll do it on the side as well, after work. In the lodgings, I've made it. They'd let me use a corner in the house. I've made a little bench and started doing a bit of work there. After several years, I was earning more money than the manager. And he said to me one day, he said, he's so very good in all this. I said, I want to go to Birmingham, where the big manufacturers, or London. And I came back and I brought some stuff that I bought. I had money then. I bought stuff. I came back and I said to the man who was in charge, the boss, look what I've got. Huh? Where do you get that from? I says, in Birmingham, I went to see so and so and so and so and so and so. People who used to supply shops like ours with gold, silver, wire, settings, all this. And he says, I'll make you a partner. So we carried on a bit longer. After a while, I thought, well, this is not good for me. I want to advance. I've lost too much time in my life. And I decided he is a partner, his wife is a partner, his grandmother is a partner, his father-in-law is a partner, he's a partner. My brain started working. I decided I'm going to leave and open my own business in Manchester.
That's amazing.
My own business, I worked long hours and I established myself.
Your story is so amazing. It's an honor to hear, hear the story and for you to be a part of it. I know, we could be here all day listening to you because it's amazing.
Thank you.
I want to ask Eleanor, and anybody can chime in. I loved how the film showed the authenticity of the psychological trauma of the Holocaust that the children went through. So why did you choose not to show the graphic nature and focus on the raw emotions of the children during that time?
So the only way we could have told the graphic nature of what had happened was to show archive footage, which many of the images of the archive footage of, say, the relief of Belsen or the kind of starvation of the Jews in the ghettos, quite well rehearsed. Many of us have seen a lot of those images many times before. And we felt that they were kind of quite familiar as images, not that makes them less important or impactful, but we just felt that this wasn't a story about then. It was a story about survival and about what happens next. It was a story about, we wanted very much to see these children as survivors, not as the kind of emaciated victims that you associate with those horrific images. And along with the paintings that Marie Paneth, character featured in our film, that she encouraged the children to do, and showing the raw emotion of the children, we felt that we could quite well depict the kind of horror of what they'd been through the power of suggestion, rather than having to show it. And that by doing that, we would meet these children as people with personalities and senses of humor and hopes and dreams and failings and aspirations, just like anybody else that you might meet. And it's really important to us that we met these survivors on those terms and not as the emaciated victims that would sort of dehumanize them, I suppose, which is what you often feel when you see those images. So it was a very, very conscious decision. And a couple of times we were asked, why aren't you showing those images? Why aren't we flashing back to those images? It would really help to show that that it happened, that it was true, that it happened to these people. And in fact, those conversations and our resistance to that also led to the very final shot of the film, which is that we saw Ike and Sir Ben Helfgott and Sam Lasker and the others actually, or when you see the film, you see we meet these men by the lake as they are now. So we kind of got the truth factor in there without having to show images of the horror. Really, it was a very, very conscious decision. Yeah,
I think it was done very well, portrayed
Well,
very.
I have actually got pictures that was taken the moment when we found out we were free outside Theresienstadt by a man who was taking photographs of what was happening there at that moment. And I managed to obtain pictures, even with all a lot of people who died in the wagons and all that. I've got all those.
I have a question. How do you feel about being one of the featured children in the film, Windermere Children?
The children.
How did you feel about being one of the children?
In the film?
And on the film, I was quite willing to do, because by that time, I thought it's important because some of the boys have passed away. I should try and do something. And I did one, and that was my start. I've not stopped.
Great.
Because
Yeah.
I used to go, well, not since the COVID, the pandemic, I've not been able to do it. But I've been going out regular to different schools, to societies, to
Various
the
organizations.
police, and all others, to different schools, even from 5, 6 years old upwards to 18 or 20 years old. And it's given me satisfaction, the fact I can do something for the coming generations to have learned something from me, because who is there to actually tell them the real thing?
Yeah.
What
It's
we
so-
went.
So important.
And so I've been, well, I consider it was my privilege that I had the opportunity, at least, to do something.
Yes. Yes. So people submitted questions, and I wanted to ask one that was posed to us, and that for Trevor and Eleanor. What is it about the arrival of these survivors in this particular part of England that makes it such a compelling story?
What makes it
So compelling.
so compelling?
Oh,
Because
Eleanor and Trevor, or?
Because it is reality. Well, it's reality.
You were the first to come as well.
Hmm?
You were the first to come.
Um,
You were the first.
Yes. Eleanor or Trevor, do you want to comment?
Well, I can speak from oh my goodness, that's my doorbell. Trevor, you answer. I should go and get the doorbell. I'm so sorry. I know this is live.
I think it's important to realize, for you guys in the States, the Lake District is one of the defining locations in England. You know, it's the home of romanticism,
You were the first.
of this notion that the landscape, that it's where you go to recover.
I said.
Wordsworth and romanticism. So the symbolism of these damaged children and romanticism was, romantics believed that the best people who could both read the landscape and also be affected by it and healed by it were children. So the notion that these children arrived from the Holocaust into the Lake District, it's tapping into a very, very deep seam of almost like that, what it is to be English and British. So the sense that I was very taken by what Eleanor said about the film. Now, if we go back to Sam Laskia, why I didn't make the film. You know, I provided information for them, but it was a terrific film. It was the way that the guys, Nancy and the guys, and Simon, the writer, really, they made a gem out of it. And it was interesting they didn't do the flashback side of it, because on that very first meeting I had with Sam Laskia, who Ike's friend, as we left the Midland Hotel, Sam said to me, Trevor, he said, I will talk to you because you're about Windermere and afterwards, but don't ever ask me what happened before, because I won't tell you. So I said, okay, Sam. Now, I became very, very close friends with Sam over the years, and he passed away very recently. I became very attached to them. And but we never did talk about what he went through during the Holocaust. His life began in Windermere and afterwards, and he represented so many. I mean, I mentioned there he didn't talk until very late on about his experiences, and many of them didn't talk about it. So although I became incredibly close friends with Sam, I knew little bits. He'd been in the Warsaw Ghetto, he'd been in Auschwitz. He would throw a little nugget into a conversation and then retreat back again. So what I think worked about the Windermere Children and how it was developed was this sense of where had they come from? There were two sort of expectations. One, that people viewing it would know about the Holocaust, that have come across it before, as Eleanor said, which the images have been seen. But also is the sense that these children in Windermere were behaving extraordinarily. They're making friendships, up to adventures and all sorts of things. But people in Windermere at the time, believe it or not, didn't know where they'd come from. They weren't told. Some of those who were running the estate knew, and some of the carers knew. But we have moments where some locals, all they were told was, by the way, these 300 youngsters are coming. And well, who were they? Oh, they were prisoners. Now, one of the features in the scenes in the film sort of touches on this. There were German POW camps in the Lake District at the time. And it sounds incredible to us, but it's a very remote part of the world. No mobile phones, no communications in any sense. So when these guys arrived, many of the local youngsters thought, oh, more German POWs. They didn't know who they were. And this slowly emerged over time. And I think the film depicts that very, very well, this slow reveal about where these children had come from and what we do. So on many levels, I was delighted with the way the film did it, that there weren't any flashbacks, because it really did. I didn't discover the story in that sense. The children had the story and the locals had the story. I was some kind of mediator who brought them both together. So the film, quite remarkably, and some kind of synchronicity, depicted my experience with many of the children and the locals. That it actually was all in. There was a lot of sort of fencing around. Who are they? Who are you? What's this? What's the other? And very, very deep friendships. A chap in the US now, in Florida, Mendel, was taken immediately to an isolation hospital for suffering very badly from TB. Many of them were very ill as well. He became close friends with an local boy called Kevin Coulter. And here they are in their 80s and 90s, and they're still friends now. You know, here we are 75 years later, they talk to each other from that time. It's so deep, profound connections. to the landscape. And I know when I listen to Ike, you know, I no matter how many times I've heard him, I can listen to him for hours, believe you me. But he touches on, it was the landscape, it was, you know, where they were placed, but they were treated with dignity for the first time. And that may not, things that we just take for granted, common courtesy, politeness, these youngsters for upwards of 5 years had not had that. And Leonard Montefiore, the chap who was in charge of bringing them over, he said they didn't know. These children had seen every corruption that you could imagine, of human corruption. They didn't know whether these children would recover, because he felt that in some senses he couldn't blame them if they didn't, you know, sort of recover, become civilized again. So Ben Helfgott talks about that. We needed re-civilizing. So it's very deep roots, this connection with, and so the Windermere Children, through the filmmakers and Michael and everybody involved, I played a small part in it. The stars are the boys themselves, and the filmmakers did a terrific job. And I think this lack of flashback was crucial to its success, I think.
I think so too. Definitely. Yeah. It made an impact and gets people to think. Yeah.
I think some people said it was probably the first one that had tackled this subject without depicting any of it. And that's very brave. Yeah. It was very brave. There were certain decisions made of the film, which they were very good, because they asked us, because we were on the ground in Windermere. The filmmakers asked us, and there were some brave decisions made, such as that. And I think in hindsight, we can all applaud the filmmakers for the award winning and sort of, it's great, wasn't it? But there's some tough calls made during that. And also the boys themselves. You know, Ike and Sam were two of the late arrivals on our scene in terms of telling their stories and telling the public. And there's a tremendous amount of courage, in a sense, for Ike and Sam to do what they did, to become so public. We are touching on very, very, there's some very, very private demons, around with this. Not all survivors could speak for 30 years in schools telling their story. And I learned that when I began doing this, many of them were taught to us, and I thought, oh, this is, survivors talk about their experiences all the time. Actually, relatively few do. Just the ones you come across, of course, in the nature of your work, are the ones that can talk. But many, many of them wouldn't talk. But I was very lucky to become very close to Ike and close to Sam and close to Harry, to others. It didn't matter to me whether they wanted to speak about their experiences or not. They were just remarkable human beings, and they had an awful lot to say about Windermere, an awful lot. And I think Sir Ben Helfgott, when I first met him, I said, we may be doing a memorial in Windermere, to the Windermere boys. And he said, no. This is an opening conversation. He was always giving us a license to say, no memorial. That was where our lives began again. What you do there is about life, not about, obviously we acknowledge the losses, the horrific losses these children had, but it's our life began there. So that's kind of been where the direction we've gone in. And again, the film showed that, I think, depicted that really well. It was the beginning. They weren't healed in Windermere by any means, but I think it's fair to say, I didn't put the words in their mouths. They began their healing process there, with a lot of people helping them as well.
For sure. For sure. Well, unfortunately, I think we have to close, but I think we could talk about this all day, and you are all amazing in your work. The film was just so emotional and so raw, and it just really, you shared an untold story that I think is now coming to light. So I would like to thank all of you for being here today. Thank you so much, Ike, for telling your story, and for all of you to bring this, again, this amazing story to the public. I would like to thank WTTW for, partnering with us. And I thank all of you for attending today's program. Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you.
you so
I
much.
personally,
Thanks for having us.
I personally would like to thank you all
Thank you. Ike.
behind
Thank you.
all the work that you're doing. It shall stand in good stead that more people will realise or get a chance to learn something from all this.
Mm.
Thank
For
you.
sure.
God bless. God
For
bless
sure.
people.
Lovely.
Thank you all.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.